You've committed to making your marriage better. You know that means being intentional about how you're interacting with your husband. And maybe you've even begun learning and applying the six intimacy skills. You want this to work. And for a little while, maybe it does. You catch yourself before you say the thing. You bite your tongue. You try the skills, and something softens between you and your husband, and you think, yes, this is it. This is what we need. But then life happens. He does the thing that drives you crazy, or he doesn't do the thing that you were hoping he would. And you're tired and stretched thin, and the duct tape flies right off. And then before you even realize it, you've said something critical, or taken over a situation, or let the frustration leak out in a way that didn't feel like the wife you're trying to be. And then comes the guilt, the discouragement, and the quiet question: why can't I just get this? If that's you, I want you to take a breath because you're in exactly the right place. Hello, and I'm relationship coach Laura Amador, and this is the Softening into Love podcast. Today, I'm going to talk about why consistently showing up as your best self in your marriage can be so much harder than it actually looks, what's actually getting in the way, and most importantly, the practical shifts that will help you stop starting over and start making real, consistent progress. But first, if you're new here, I want to invite you to grab the free guide. It's called Three Steps to Reignite Connection in Your Marriage, and it'll give you a strong, grounded foundation to build from. It's short, it's real, and it works. So before we go any further, let's talk about what trying to be a respectful wife really means. What do I mean by respect? Because it might not be what you imagine. Respect in marriage isn't about shrinking yourself or becoming a different person just to manage your husband's reactions. The kind of respect that I'm talking about here is about how you show up, the energy that you bring into the room, the tone behind your words, and the trust that you extend to your husband, even when it's hard. It's choosing to lead with warmth instead of criticism, with curiosity instead of correction, and with openness instead of control. And this isn't about him having to earn it, because then you're in constant evaluation mode. This is because you've decided that that's the kind of wife and woman that you want to be. And that distinction matters because if you've been feeling like practicing respect means betraying yourself, then I want you to know that that is not what it is at all. The goal is to become more yourself, not less, and to let the truest, softest, most grounded version of you be what your marriage gets to feel. So, first, let's talk about why the skills can feel really hard to stick with, and it's probably not what you think. So, here's what most women don't realize when they first start this journey: the skills aren't hard because you're doing them wrong necessarily, but because you might not know what's working against you just yet. So, let's name a few of those things because awareness is where the shift begins. You might be trying to perform the skills instead of really feeling and embodying them. This is a big one, and it's worth slowing down for a second here. When we come to this work with anxiety about doing it right or doing it perfectly, we often end up self monitoring instead of connecting, and your husband can feel the difference between genuine softness and forced behavior or strategic actions and phrases. He might not be able to name it, but he can certainly feel it, and no amount of perfectly memorized responses can replace what a soft and open heart can do. The goal here isn't perfection, it's emotional safety, warmth, and real connection. Another obstacle that I often see is that you're running on empty. When you're depleted, under rested, overextended, or emotionally starved, you have almost no buffer between feeling something and saying something because the skills require an inner reserve, a moment of pause between what you feel and how you respond. When that reserve is empty, there's no pause and there's only reaction, which is why so many women find that their slips happen most often when they're exhausted rather than when they're feeling really good. So it's not that the skills are failing, it's often that our tanks run dry. Another obstacle is that the stories in your head might be working against you. Criticism always starts on the inside before it comes out of your mouth. And those quiet thoughts like, he never listens, or I have to do everything, or nothing's ever going to change, shift your emotional tone, whether you mean to or not. So your mind searches for evidence of whatever story it already believes. So when the story is one of resentment, it's going to find proof of that everywhere that it looks. And this is one of the most important places to do that in your work because changing your internal narrative is what changes everything that follows. Another obstacle is that you feel unseen and it's hard to give what you're not getting. One of the deepest struggles that wives share with me is that they're trying to be more respectful and softer and more open while feeling completely unseen and unappreciated in return. When you're running on, I give, and he doesn't notice, resentment builds quietly underneath that, and that eventually comes to the surface. That feeling of disconnection. Another obstacle is that you might be measuring progress by his immediate response. This one quietly breaks so many women who try the skills for a week or two, and when he doesn't suddenly transform overnight, they take it as proof that it's not working. But emotional trust often needs time to rebuild, and most husbands need time before they feel safe enough to soften as well. Consistency matters so much more here than intensity. And the women who keep going even when they can't see the results yet are always the one who eventually get them. Another obstacle might be that you don't have a plan for your hardest moments. Most women are practicing the skills in general, but haven't thought through the specific situations where they always slip, like the stressful car ride, or the way he interacts with the kids, or his spending, or his driving. Those are the recurring moments when you know exactly how this tends to go, and yet it still goes that way because without a plan for those specific triggers, you end up improvising under pressure, and under pressure, old habits always win. And lastly, you might be trying to go too fast. There's an urgency that comes with reading a transformational book and thinking, I need to fix this now. And that energy is completely understanding. But lasting change doesn't happen in a burst of enthusiasm. It happens in small, consistent, gentle repetitions. And when you expect too much too soon, everything can slip and discouragement can follow. And discouragement often leads to giving up. You're too close to something real to give up. So let's now get into what actually works. These are 9 tips for staying consistent with being your best self and to setting a respectful tone. These are the 9 shifts that I've seen make the biggest difference, both in my own marriage and in the lives of the women that I coach. So take what resonates, leave what doesn't. The first is to go slowly and give yourself grace. You're probably not going to change overnight, and that's not just okay, but it's completely normal. Real transformation is often quiet and cumulative, and it looks less like flipping a switch and more like tending a garden where you water it a little bit every day. Some days, maybe nothing looks different, and then one day, like the springtime, something is blooming that wasn't there before. And when you do slip, remember that the goal was never to not slip. The goal is to recover faster with compassion, respect, and self awareness because stress triggers old patterns and healing isn't linear. The fact that you noticed, that you felt the sting of the moment and genuinely wanted to do better means that awareness itself is progress. So don't let that one hard day undo everything that you've been quietly building. Lower the bar for what counts as a win. If you caught yourself mid sentence and stopped, that's a win. If you took a breath before responding, that's a win. If you chose to say, I hear you, instead of launching into your rebuttal, that's a meaningful win. Celebrate those micro moments because they are the building blocks of who you're becoming. Number 2 is to watch the stories that you tell yourself. Before we even talk about what to say to your husband, let's talk about what you're saying to yourself because the internal monologue matters so much. When you notice a thought like, he never appreciates me, or I always have to manage everything, gently ask yourself whether that's really the full story. Because resentment grows where gratitude disappears, and your mind will always find evidence for whatever it's looking for. So make a conscious choice about what you want it to look for. What if instead of watching his every move for signs whether things are getting better, you started noticing his goodness, his effort, his character, and the small ways he's showing up that you might be too depleted to see right now? That shift from evaluating to admiring and from monitoring to connecting changes the entire atmosphere of a marriage, and it starts entirely within you. Next is to make self care non negotiable. And this is the one that women most often skip. I cannot tell you how many times a woman has told me that she slipped badly. She said something cutting, took over a situation, or lost her patience entirely. And when we trace it back together, she hadn't done anything for herself, sometimes even in several days. So, when in doubt, check your self care. And I don't mean just tidying up so that you can feel more peaceful. Of course, that feels nice, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the things that genuinely restore you, like a walk alone, or a creative outlet, or time with a friend who makes you laugh, or just sitting quietly with your coffee before the rest of the house wakes up. Self care is not a luxury in this process, it is the foundation. Because when you're alive in your own life and your cup has something in it, the rest of the skills can flow naturally. When you're running on fumes, even the best intentions in the world will eventually collapse. Next is to build a life that has absolutely nothing to do with monitoring your marriage. This is related to self care, but I want to name it separately because it matters so, so much. A lot of women who are working hard on their marriages become emotionally consumed by this process and are constantly analyzing interactions, watching his moods, and wondering whether things are getting better or worse. That constant vigilance is exhausting in a way that makes everything feel much harder. Women who glow from within bring very different energy into a marriage than women who are emotionally starving. So invest in your friendships, your creativity, your spiritual life, any of the things that make you feel like you, apart from your role as a wife. When you have a full, nourishing life outside of your marriage, you naturally stop white knuckling every interaction and start bringing ease and warmth instead. Next is to check what's really motivating you. When we try to practice respect while our hearts are still focused on everything that he's doing wrong, we end up fighting ourselves the whole way. One of the most powerful things you can do is intentionally shift your focus to what you genuinely love and admire about your husband, not what you want him to be down the line, but what he already is right now. What has he done recently or even in the past that was selfless or caring, even in a small way? What traits drew you to him in the first place? And what does he do that he doesn't even know that you notice? Keep a running list if it helps. And think about it in the morning before you even see him. Because when you let your heart soften towards him first, you'll be amazed at how much easier the words and the tone become. This is about watering the soil so that something can actually grow. Next is to remember what he actually hears when you're being disrespectful. Here's something that truly changed how I speak in my marriage. When I'm being critical, even when I genuinely believe I'm just being helpful or practical or honest, what my husband often hears is, "You're not smart enough. I don't think you're capable," or "I don't trust you." That's never what I think I mean or what I think I'm portraying, but it's what lands. And once I really understood that, my motivation to catch myself became so much stronger, not because I was forcing myself to be nicer, but because I genuinely didn't want him to feel that way. So before you speak, ask yourself, what is the underlying message of what you're really trying to say, and whether that's the message that you actually want to send. Most of the time, when we get really honest with ourselves, it isn't. Next is to plan ahead for your hardest moments. Think about the situation that always seems to unravel you, the recurring ones and the predictable friction points, and write them down. Take some time to journal about this. When you're calm and clear headed, decide in advance what you'd like to say or do instead and practice it in your mind so that the response that you're proud of has a chance to live in your muscle memory. Because in the moment, you probably won't have time to think it all through calmly. You'll only have time to react. And the response that's already been rehearsed is the one that has a fighting chance of showing up. This isn't about scripting yourself into something fake, but it's about knowing yourself well enough to set yourself up for success. The eighth tip here is to practice pause. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply not say the thing that's on your mind at the moment. At least not right now. You don't have to respond immediately to everything because most criticism is born in moments of emotional flooding. And a pause creates space for dignity, self control, and wisdom. Some practical ways to pause are to take a slow breath, maybe have a sip of water, maybe even just say out loud, I'd love a moment to think about that. And give yourself permission to step out of the room briefly, or simply choose to respond a little later when you've had a moment to settle and think. That pause gives space for your wisest inner voice to speak to you. The more you practice letting a moment pass without needing to fill it, the more you'll notice how many of the things that you felt compelled to say weren't actually necessary. And in that quiet space, something else gets room to breathe. And it's something softer and more connecting that moves you closer to the marriage that you want. The last tip I'm going to share today is to consider going at it with somebody who's already walked this path successfully. The women that I've watched make the most beautiful, lasting progress are the ones who didn't try to do this alone. Not because it's not possible, but because having someone walk line alongside you who has already done this changes everything. When you have someone who's been where you are, who believes in what's possible for your marriage, and who can help you see your blind spots, celebrate your wins, and come back to the truth when you're feeling discouraged, the journey stops feeling like a lonely uphill climb and starts feeling like something that you can actually sustain. So, if there's a coach, a mentor, or a woman in your life whose story you relate to, whose approach feels aligned with your values, and who you feel like you can trust, and who's already shown you something helpful or hopeful, consider letting her walk alongside you. You don't have to figure this out alone, and you don't have to keep starting over. Of course, this doesn't have to be me, although I have coached many, many women through powerful transformations. However, I invite you and encourage you to consider somebody who you feel like you can trust and who aligns with you. So let's do a quick summary of what we've covered. You want to be a respectful, connected, loving wife, and you are that woman. The slipping doesn't mean that you failed. It means that you're human and you're still in the arena. The obstacles that derail even the most motivated wives are performing instead of feeling the skills, running on empty, letting internal stories feed resentment, feeling unseen, measuring progress by his immediate response, not having a plan for the hard moments, and possibly moving too fast. And the shifts that actually help are going slowly and recovering with grace when you slip, watching the narrative running in your head, prioritizing your self care, building a life outside of monitoring your marriage, shifting your focus to admiration and gratitude, and understanding what he really hears when you hop on his paper, planning for your hardest moments in advance, practicing the pause, and finding someone you trust to walk with you. You're so much closer than you think. And if this resonated with you and you're ready to take a real step towards a more connected marriage, download my free guide, 3 Steps to Reignite Connection in Your Marriage. It's warm, practical, and created for exactly where you are right now. And you'll find that in the description. And if you're at the point where you're ready to stop doing this alone, if you're looking for someone whose approach feels like home, then I'd love to invite you to reach out to me. The link to connect with me is in the description. You've got this, and I'm rooting for you. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And until next time, keep softening into love.